In today's lesson, we're going to learn how to solve equations with variables on both sides. Example 1, how do I solve equations with variables on both sides? All right, so let's take a look at our first example. We have 5x minus 3 is equal to 3x plus 1. I like to start these as well by drawing your fence down the middle. And what we need to look at is if we have variables on both sides, we have to combine those variables first. And so take a look here. I have a 5x, which is a variable, and I have a 3x, which is also a variable. It's not going to matter if you subtract the 3x on both sides or if you subtract the 5x on both sides. That doesn't matter, but what you do need to start with is by combining those variables first. So I'm going to start by subtracting this 3x. Remember, we're trying to get all the variables to one side, all the numbers to the other side. And so I'm going to then take 5x minus 3x, and I will get 2x. Now I have minus 3 is equal to 1. And notice here, now we're back to a two-step equation, which we've been solving for quite some time. So now let's look at it, and I'm going to then undo that minus 3 by adding the 3 to both sides. And that's going to cancel out that 3, and I have 2x is equal to 4. Now I have all the variables on one side, I have all the numbers on the other side. So now it's time for me to then undo that 2 is multiplying that variable, so I'm going to undo it by dividing. And we have x is equal to 2. All right, now let's go and let's just, we're not going to do this for all of them, but let's go ahead and we'll plug it in wherever we see this x. All right, so we'll have a 2 here and a 2 here. So it's 5 times 2 minus 3 equal to 3 times 2 plus 1. 10 minus 3 and 6 plus 1. 10 minus 3 is 7 and 6 plus 1 is 7. And so yes, in fact, that is the solution. X is equal to 2. All right, our next example, we have 3x plus 6 is equal to 8 plus x. All right, so let's go ahead and we'll start with placing our line down the middle. And again, we have to get all the variables to one side, all the numbers to the other. And when you have variables on both sides, you have to start with the variables. And so this has a 1. And so, and I could minus the 3x, but I think it's easier if I can keep mine positive. I try to. And so 3x minus 1x is 2x plus 6 is equal to 8. Now we're going to minus the 6. We'll get our numbers to the other side without the variables. We have 2x is equal to then 2. We'll divide by 2. And then x is going to be equal to 1. All right, example 2, how do I solve equations with grouping symbols? Notice how I do have variables on both sides. Also notice that on the left, the 2 times y minus 3, that I am able to simplify that. And so if you're ever able to simplify something on one side, you have to do that before you can bring anything from side to side. Before you can isolate that variable, you have to go and you have to do this part first. So I'm going to then distribute and simplify by taking 2 times y. I'll have 2y. 2 times negative 3 is negative 6 is equal to y plus 4. All right, so now it's not going to matter if I subtract my y or if I subtract my 2y. Just to make it a little bit easier, I'm going to subtract this 1y so I don't get a negative over there, but it does not matter. All right, so now I have 2y minus 1y is just 1y, and I just write that as a y. Minus 6 is equal to then 4. And then I'm going to add my 6 to bring all the numbers without the variables to the other side. And I'll have y then is equal to 10. All right, so let's take a look at the next example. We have 9x minus 5 is equal to 1/4 times 16x plus 60. All right, again, we need to start over here where we have to simplify before we can do anything else. So I'm going to take 1/4 of 16 now. If you're struggling with those fractions, just turn it into a decimal. 1 divided by 4 and then times 16, and then 1 divided by 4 and then times that by 60. So 1/4 of 16 is going to be 4x, and then 1/4 of 60 is equal to 15. All right, so now we have the 9x minus 5 is equal to 4x plus 15. Now remember, we have to bring the variables together first. Now, I'm going to, normally I'd probably subtract the 4x because again, I like to keep my number with the variable positive, but I would like to show that you're able to do it either way. So I'm going to minus my 9x on both sides, and I'd have negative 5 is equal to negative 5x plus 15. All right, so now we've got all of our variables on one side. We need to bring the numbers without the variables to the other then. So I'm going to minus my 15, and I'm going to get negative 20 is equal to negative 5x. All right, so now that negative 5 is multiplying that x, so we're going to divide by a negative 5 on both sides. And x is going to be equal to positive 4. All right, let's go ahead and let's practice a few more here. All right, number 1, we're going to solve 9 minus 3k is equal to 17 minus 2k. All right, so let's take a look. Remember, we can't simplify anything. So our next step then would be to bring all the variables together. And I'm going to add this 3k, and it wouldn't have mattered if you added the 2k. Again, I like to try to keep my variables positive, but you don't have to, and you're not always going to be able to. So I added the 3k to both sides, and that cancels this one out, and I have 9 is equal to 17 minus, let's see here, minus just 1k, so I've got a k, or I'm sorry, plus a k, because I had a positive answer. Negative 2 plus 3 is positive 1, so I'd have 1k, or just k is fine too. All right, so now I've got my variables to one side, and now let's undo and bring together the numbers without the variables. So I'm going to subtract 17 on both sides, and I'll have negative 8 then is equal to k. And now you've all finished. Now if you want to, again, you can plug in your negative 8 on the top to make sure that everything equals. We're not going to take the time to do that now though. All right, number 2, we have 5z minus 2 is equal to 2 times 3z minus 4. All right, again, so we're going to draw a line down the middle. And now in this one, notice that we can simplify that 2 times 3z minus 4. So we have to start there first. So I'm going to take 2 times 3z, and I'll have 6c. 2 times negative 4 is going to give me a negative 8. Since I have a negative answer, I'll have a minus 8. And now I'll have 5z minus 2. All right. So now you have to bring your variables all to one side. I could either subtract the 6z or I could subtract the 5z. It doesn't matter. You're undoing one. I'm going to subtract my 5z on both sides, but it doesn't matter if you had done the other. I have minus 2. Don't forget there was a negative there. Is equal to z minus 8, because 6z minus 5z gives me 1z. All right, so now I'm going to add my 8, and I have z is equal to then positive 6. All right, so now we have 8y minus 6 is equal to 2/3 times 6y plus 15. And here again, for this one, we do need to simplify before we can bring anything from side to side. So I'm going to multiply 2/3 times 6y and 2/3 times 15. And 2/3 times 6 gives me 4y. And then 2/3 times 15 is going to give me 10. All right, so now everything's been simplified. So now remember, we have to start with our variables. So I'm going to minus the 4y on both sides. I have 4y minus 6 is equal to then 10. All right, so now we're going to then, we have to put our numbers without the variables together. And I have 4y is equal to 16. I'm going to divide by 4, and y is going to be equal to 4. All right, example 3, how do I justify the steps of equality? Name the property of equality, each step used in solving the equation. All right, so in one of the previous lessons, we had talked about the properties of equality. It was the addition, the subtraction, the multiplication, and division properties of equality. And so when you're justifying each step, you're always going to start with whatever you have at the beginning. That is what you're going to write, and you're going to write given right there, because this is what you've been given. All right, so now we need to look and see what did they do to get to this next step. And notice what they did is they minus the 4x, for combining like terms, bringing all the variables. So notice to get to the next step that they subtracted the 4x on each side. So what was just applied then is the subtraction property of equality. All right, so we just shorten that up there. All right, so now let's look. What would be the next step that you would do? Well, all the variables are on one side, so then notice how you would be then adding the 7, and that's what they did. That canceled out, they got the 6x is equal to 12. So doing that next step was the addition property of equality, all right? And then to get to that last step, what you do is you divide by 6. So then when you divided by 6, you applied the division property of equality. All right, so one more example here where we're going to justify the steps. And again, remember the first property, or the first thing that you always say is that what was given. So the first line will always be given. All right, now notice how to get to the next step. Before you could bring anything from side to side, you would then need to distribute. And so they took 6 times 3, that's where they got the 18x, and 6 times negative 4 got the negative 24. So the property that was applied then is the distributive property. All right, and then the next thing that you would do in solving this one then, all the variables are already on one side, so now what you need to do is to bring the numbers without the variables to the other side. And notice how there's 18x plus 36. And so what we just did is that we applied the addition property of equality. All right, and then that last step then, now to get to the next, we divided by 18 on both sides. So to get to that x is equal to 2, the division property of equality was applied. All right, so in this lesson, we took a look at how to solve equations with variables on both sides and then how to justify the steps.